Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of the 25 Days of Flows, the Power Automate Advent Calendar. We've had a wonderful first few days this month. We've covered on December 1st the YouTube video. We covered on December 2nd, we covered how to push Dynamics updates to a team message. One of our commenters pointed out the Dynamics connector may be deprecated. If that's the case, you can use the CDS, the Common Data Service connector, and it will help you do the exact same thing. On day 3, which was yesterday, we learned how to optimize insights for our team by sending form responses for approval on Microsoft Teams, but also submitting to Power BI the actual RFI and the conclusions so that we could watch trends in Power BI. That was a fun one. Today is day 4, and we're going to talk about how we would send a welcome email for anyone being added to our Microsoft Teams instances. This will send a welcome message as they join the team. Now, this is something that looks pretty straightforward, but I would consider this intermediate because there are a few gotchas involved here that would normally require you understanding the JSON. But I've made this really easy for you to download, and you can use my template at any time. We also will have a template for everybody in the world that will release for this purpose as well, to make this really easy to do. Okay, so let's get started by kind of looking at what is our goal here. We have 3 connectors involved in this one today. We have Office 365 groups because each group is what's used on Teams. So when you have a Teams site, you actually also have the ability to pull the members of that Teams instance directly from Office 365 groups, and I'll show you that. We're also going to use Azure Active Directory, and I will say here that there is Azure Active Directory. There are actually quite a few connectors for Azure, but Azure Active Directory is not a premium feature as long as you have connected to Azure Active Directory. But the HTTP for Azure Active Directory is premium, but we're not going to use that one today. The 3 that we're going to use today are all standard. This whole flow relates to Teams. So you could welcome them to Teams at the end of the message as well as sending the email. So that's what we'll do to kind of extend this a slight bit further. On the bottom right of this slide, there's an optional trigger condition, and this is the gotcha. I actually think that this connector is kind of weird in its configuration, but the connector can have a trigger condition so that you only pick up who was added and you're not bothered by those who left. And let me show you what that looks like in Flow. So we're going to go over to Flow, and today, for the first time, we're going to create our Flow from scratch. There are, by the way, just to let you know, there are quite a few templates that have to do with Office 365 groups and Azure AD. If you just search for them on the template page, you'll see there's quite a few templates for Azure Active Directory as well as Office 365 groups. So be curious and go check those out. But I'm going to create the flow today from scratch. Since we're trying to pick up something that happens as an event, I bet you can guess which type of flow I'm going to do, because I am not going to initiate this. I'm not going to schedule it. It's not a business process flow. It is an automated flow. And that's because we're going to allow flow to respond to an event. Okay. So I'm going to click automated, and let's name this Teams welcome email. And what I'm going to look for is member added. And you'll see that we have a few different services that think this way. So be sure to pick the Office 365 groups when a group member is added or removed. Now, sometimes on the screen, these can be truncated as far as the whole name, but if you just hover as you see here, you can see the entire name of this particular trigger. And now we're going to create the flow. So we've got a name and we've got a trigger. All right. So notice that this is when a group member is added or removed. And our goal here is only to do something when someone is added. So first I'm going to pick my group that I want to evaluate. So in other words, maybe I just made the Power Platform Demos group and I'm starting to add people. Whether I add them or they join, this will trigger, right? This will also trigger when they leave the group, okay? Or when I remove them from the group, okay? So I have two choices here, and whichever one is better for you is what you should do. I could create a condition here so that after this triggers, I can check for, and this is where I said it's a little bit strange. This trigger thinks about why a person was added or removed using a reason parameter. The @removed parameter doesn't actually help you in this case. So you need the reason parameter, which is what caused the user to be removed from the group. And you might think this is the opposite, and you're kind of right, because what you would put on the other side here is an expression called null. And it needs to be an expression. And now what you're saying is the reason is equal to null. And this is because when people are added or removed, the actual JSON that's being returned in this trigger has a reason equal to deleted when they're removed. So if they're removed, and I think also if they leave, there's a different one. But if they were added, there's no reason, okay? I know it's kind of strange, but you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and I'll always help you work around these challenges here. So in this case, if you have the condition as reason equal to null, then you would put your email message in the yes section, because this would be our added people. Right? So at this point, we would do send an email, and whichever email notification you want to use. And that's where it would sit. And so this would mean this side is an added member because the reason is null. And notice I could use copy to my clipboard after I configure this. I'm going to do this slightly different. I can use copy to my clipboard here inside the condition, add an action, click on my clipboard, and now I have them both the same. And then I can just revise this one. I really love how copy and paste makes life so much better. So on this side, we may not need to send an email. But you know what you might send them is a thank you for being part of our team. Here's a link if you ever want to come back. So this would be kind of thank you for being with us, the short period of time that you were or the long period of time you were. But here's where I'd put the welcome message for the person added. Okay. Now again, I'm telling you, I'm going to do this slightly different because I don't want all these actions. All right. So I'm going to delete this condition and I'm going to use a trigger condition in my settings. So if I go into my settings, this will give me less steps. All right, so I'm going to have a trigger condition. I put it in the description so you'd have it, but I also have my little notes here in my notepad. Sometimes I'll put notes in Notepad that I'm going to use in my flows. Please understand that Notepad is my favorite because it doesn't add any formatting. And it's important that when you're using advanced expressions or any kind of expressions, that these quote marks, these single quotation marks, they're not curvy. And if I copied that format from, say, Word, those quotations might get curvy. And if they're curvy, they actually will force an error. Okay, so make sure that when you're, you might have a little repository like I do of all your favorite functions. Just remember that when you copy and paste them, just double check that whatever you copied them from didn't make anything, serif font. They should all be just sans serif, very straight quotes. Now, I made this using the recommendation that I gave in my video on trigger conditions, which was about a month ago. So you can go take a peek at that. Trigger conditions is a little gift we got from the Logic Apps teams that enables us to specify when this trigger will trigger, right? So in this case, I'm using a trigger that says that the triggerBody removed property in the reason element of that is null. Okay, so all I'm saying is that the removed reason is null. And because I have this in here as a trigger, and it'll be in the description and it'll be in the flow that you'll download as well, then that will be the only thing that will trigger this flow. Okay, so if somebody left, this flow will not trigger. Okay, it will pick up a skipped check, but it will not trigger. So you don't have to worry about anything in this flow occurring unless the person has been added. Okay, and that's why we use that trigger condition. And because I've used it, I don't have to add a condition or a yes or a no or any of that. So my flow can stay a little bit smaller. Now, the next thing I need to find out is who is that person. Now, I'll give you a little trick that I like to do sometime. I'll use the compose action. It's one of my favorite, to see what is returned from this trigger, right? So if I click on my dynamic tag, that dynamic content plus sign, you'll see that item, removed, value, reason, and user ID is there. So you know what I don't have here is an email address. And since I want to send an email, I need to get that email address. So I can get that using the user ID. So I'm going to get rid of compose. That was just my cheat. It was my way to peek and see what I get out of here. And now I'm going to do Azure Active Directory, because Azure Active Directory can give me information on a person using the user ID. Now notice that if I go to Premium, you do not see Azure Active Directory. However, HTTP with Azure Active Directory is Premium. All right. However, Azure Active Directory is not. It's standard. So just to let you know, all right, we're dealing with a standard connection. And now I'm going to take that and I'm going to choose Get User down here. And notice that we pop these up sometime whenever we think you might want to learn more about this particular connector, and that will take you to the docs page that I showed you on day 1. Okay, you can just say, got it. If you get tired of watching them, just click, don't show me this again. So I want to pick Get User because I want to get the user that was added. And so all I'm going to put in here is the one thing it needs is the user ID. So I will plop the user ID in there. And that's all you have to do, because now if I try compose now, just to show you, now I have the dynamic tags from both these first two, and Get User, remember I taught you yesterday you can collapse and expand these, but Get User actually has their email. It also has their first name and their last name. Now, interestingly enough, in the older way of doing this, it actually said first name or last name in the description of the property. So just remember that when you, this is how I remember. What's the difference between a given name and a surname? A given name is something you actually gave them on the day of their birth, and that's their first name. But the surname is the one that's been traveling with them and their family all along. You didn't have to give it to them. They were born with it. Okay? So that's how I remember. I gave it to you on your birthday, so it's your first name. All right? And so I can get that, the email. I can even get their office location, their preferred language. This would be really great working with some translation tools, preferred language. And then we'll go ahead and choose mail. All right. Now, I don't want to use this in a compose, but I just wanted to show you. That's how I checked to see if it was there. We're actually going to use it instead in the send an email. So we're going to send an email. Always choose the most recent version of send an email if you can. And then you can change if you need to. But I think we deprecated one of the send an emails, and we might only have one left. But kind of take your time to what you can do to narrow this choice of actions down is click the connector. This will give you only the Outlook actions, right? And I only see one plain old send an email, and it's V2. This may change. I'm talking to you from December 4th, 2019. It may change. So just look for send an email with the highest V, or the send an email that's there, because that's what we need. And then who this is going to be that mail person. So in that get user, you'll use the mail, which is email, for sending it to them. And then your subject can be as simple as welcome to our Power Platform Teams instance, right? It could be something as simple as that. Or it could be something like you're invited. Maybe this will get them to open the email. I don't know, whatever you think is best for the subject. And then here's what's important. This V2 does not have that HTML property. And that's because we've changed this to have rich text. So in order to use HTML, and I usually do use HTML for any professional email that I want to look good. And just a couple of tips on how to get your emails formatted really nice. One, I think the best person to reach out to if you have them in your company is the marketing person. Marketing people always have beautifully formatted emails. And if you ask them, they'll give you their each HTML templates or their OFT templates, and then you can use that HTML. Secondly, you can use Outlook to build a pretty email and then save it as HTML to get that HTML format. So there are a few tools you can use to make WYSIWYG HTML. And if you write HTML, then of course you can do that as well. But lucky you, you can download this template and get my email format for free. So if I just paste here, I will not get an HTML format. If I want to paste HTML div tags in here so that I get that HTML format that I made, I need to click on these tags first. And you'll see the HTML that's already encoded there. So what I've done is I've built my HTML template, and we're just gonna take that stuff out of there. And I actually have more than I actually need because I used a WYSIWYG tool to do this. But here you go, you got all of your stuff. And basically, you know what I'll do to give you a little tip is I might make an instant flow, right? And then in my instant flow, I'll put something like, I'm gonna use Contoso here. I'm gonna maybe use an instant flow to test out my email format. I just keep sending it to myself using a button. Keep sending it to myself until I'm happy with the email format. There is a little bit of trial and error because I'm pretty anal, about these things. And then once I get it where I want it, then I take that HTML and I put it in the actual flow that's going to be sending the email. This one has a company name, a company logo, and a place for their first name. So if you want to put their first name in here, again, because I'm in a huge text block, now you're going to get dynamic content the old way. So you will notice there's two different ways of getting dynamic content now, and you just have to kind of adapt to whichever way presents itself based on what field you clicked in. All right. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get that given name, which will be the first name. And you can see here in the old version of or I shouldn't say old because it's still here, but the original dynamic content, we actually said first name in parentheses for given and last name for surname. So if you don't see that, again, just remember you gave them their first name when they were born. They didn't need you to give them the surname because it carried with them, right? That's how I remember. So you know the difference between the two. The only other thing I have on the bottom of here is a variable for the team's URL. And basically that's so that I can give them a link to the team's URL when at the bottom of the email. So I don't have to log into this person's account. You can see the email. So I'll just add myself as a CC. And there I am. And I could also use tags here, but remember the tags, if they are not seen when you click on the right, then you'll hit the plus sign here to find them. Okay. All right. So now we have that filled out. I think I wanted to add the variable. So I'm going to add a variable at the top here. So I'm just going to initialize a variable. Remember we talked about variables yesterday. They're just containers. They're buckets and they hold things. Usually things that change during the flow. Sometimes in this case, it's going to be a static, right? So I just want this to hold the team's URL. So I'm going to name this initialize variable for the link to teams. Okay, kind of keep it very simple so everybody knows what this is about. Nobody will see this, but other people I share this flow with. But I like to leave it that way. So if I'm on vacation, they don't have to go get me to find out what this flow is doing, right? That's all the information is right there documented in the flow. And to get your Teams link, in this case, I want to send them always to the same Teams. I'm just going to go to the team site, hit those three dots, and say get link to team. And then I hit copy to copy that to my clipboard, and I'm going to paste that in my variable. Now, the email will use that variable to give the person at the bottom here a link to the team site. And so let's give it a try. Since I CC'd myself, we can do save. Make sure it says saved over here before we leave this. All right, it says saved. Now I'm going to go to Teams and I'm going to add a person. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to add my friend Jay. Okay, so now Jay has been added as a member of this site. We're going to see if that triggered the flow. Now, it normally takes about 2 minutes to trigger, but let's see how long it takes. I'm going to go back to my flows. Well, actually, I'm going to go back a page with the blue arrow, which will take me to the details page of this. We might need to wait a little bit. So let's just check. Oh, we got it. We got it. Okay. So I think what may happen and what you just saw, and this all happened in the span of 2 minutes, but what happens is possibly something occurs the moment that person's added before the reason gets available. And so it may come up as a check first and then succeed. And that's what I see here. But again, like I said, this is a very particular type of connection that was done in a very interesting way. And so it still works though. All right. So let's check my email to see if I got it. Yes, I did. You see, it's called You're Invited. And there it has my logo. I forgot to replace the name, but here's Hello Jay. And here's the link to the team site. And I'm going to join on the web. And it will open up my team site to the general channel. So the only thing I forgot to do, let's look at that email one more time, is I forgot to replace name with the name of my team. Because this is a template that I use. And of course, I would want to say stuff here. So basically, it's Latin text. But what you want to say in your welcome message is you want to give people a framework as to why you've invited them. I know there's so many times I get invited to teams, I have no idea why I'm invited. So I'm not going to be very useful if I have no idea why I'm there. But if I got an email that said, hey, we've invited you because we value your contributions in this particular area, or we need your help in this particular area, and here are some resources we've gathered for members of our team so that we are successful in our mission, now I have framework. And now I actually will engage in that team's instance. So help your team to have a framework around why they've been invited, and I bet you they'll have improved engagement. Especially if you need something particular from them as a contribution, spelling that out will not only make them feel valuable, but it'll encourage them to participate. So I believe the name, and of course, you can do this in OneNote before you paste it in there so that it's easier to use Find to find it. But you see right here, I'm going to change name to the Power Platform Teams. Or I could just say, welcome to the Power Platform Team. Any way you want to do this. And you notice I put that in header tags so that it's a little bit bigger than the rest. And if we test this now, you'll know exactly what will happen. So these are the kind of things you want to think about. I think this is a great template to download, even if it's just a starting point and it gets you in the habit of inviting people, welcoming people to your teams with some framework. So thank you for coming to day 4. I'm wishing you a happy holiday, and I look forward to tomorrow when we'll talk about another flow from the 25 Days of Flows, the Power Automate Advent Calendar. Thank you so much, and happy holidays.